Shalom, and welcome to Expanding Your Vision, our weekly podcast seeking to live in the times of the scriptures that the Bible presents us, focusing sometimes on the Torah portion, focusing sometimes on the feasts and festivals we've just left or are approaching. One of the ones this week, we are in the fifth week of consolations, and these are the 7 consolations that are given to help us recover after 3 weeks, 21 days of the dire straits, which the last 9 of which are particularly dire and narrow, leading to Tisha B'Av, the 9th of Av, with its many ominous historical moments. But the energy that still manifests in that period of time is still there, impacting lives throughout the world, even in the modern day. But we are promised a future where even our time of mourning will be turned into joy. And it's one of the festivals or times, it's gathering points that's even thought to come in the world and the redemption to be one of the most joyous times of year. But now, as reward to bring us back and head us toward the fall feast, and into and through the fall feast, we have the 7 consolations. So our Torah portion is Ki Tetzei. It's when you go out. We're in Deuteronomy, Devarim, words, chapter 21, verse 10 through chapter 25, verse 19. And the part of consolation this week comes from Isaiah. That part is mostly taken out of chapter 54, but if you want to gain some traction and build some speed up into that, you can start back at chapter 52, verse 13. And this leads us, into this month of ELUL, this time of the 40 days, again, partly including in these 7 consolations, which extends from Av into ELUL. So there's a lot of various energies going on in our midst, and generally more to be on the ascent, positive redemption, manifesting that which the Lord has been putting into our hearts. And again, the king is out in the field. Mm-hmm. He's out amongst his people, more available, nearer to us than usual. And how bad can that be? That's got to be the most wonderful of things. But he's always an ever-present help in time of trouble. But here in this time, even in celebration, he's near.
Right. And so one of the phrases that I've heard more than ever, in even just these last few months, is whenever we're reading the scripture, there's pay attention to, the word going down or descending or whatever.
Yes.
And so that's usually going down, descending into something for the purpose of ascending.
Yes.
And so that's really kind of what happened. Once again, we're in the month of ELUL. This is the third day of ELUL. And so the whole dire strait thing was about, the scouts coming back with a bad report when they were supposed to go in the land. And that was a day where several other things happened, such as the falling of the 2 temples, and just tons of stuff. And so that's what the dire straits are. And so then we start ascending up out of that, and then we come into the month of ELUL. But the first day, so this is, Moshe came down from Mount Sinai, so there's a descent for the purpose of another ascent. Right. So, but Moshe came down from Mount Sinai with the first set of tablets, but threw them down because of the sin of the golden calf. Then Moshe went back up with the second time to get the second set of tablets, which he had to hewn out himself and carry back up. And it's taught that the second 40-day period began on the first day of the month of ELUL. And his mission, when he came back down, would be on the 40th day, of course, and that would be Yom Kippur. And so there's really just a lot of meaning to this period of time as well. And so you can better bet that that those people, after Moshe threw down the tablets and was going to go back up, you can be assured that they were in a time of repenting. And so that's what this time period is all about. Once again, ELUL is the acronym for the phrase Ani Ladodi Vidodi Li, meaning I am my beloved's and my beloved is mine. Once again, from Song of Solomon 2:16. So this is kind of ELUL is kind of an annual honeymoon between the divine and us. That's how the Jewish people look at it. It represents the unconditional love, not as a starry-eyed lovers who have not learned each other's faults, but of mature mates who have gone through good and bad together. ELUL is not a time to cover up our flaws, but rather a time to put them in a proper context as part of a complicated journey through life. ELUL encourages us to view ourselves as loved enough to be honest in facing ourselves. And ELUL also is the month of fruit, so that's what we have out of that. Moshe's going up to get the tablets again, and we're going to come to Yom Teruah. A lot of people call it Rosh Hashanah, but it's the Yom Teruah, which is the day of the awakening blast of the shofar. So we have everything here that's to display. We have visuals. And so, and then one last thing before I hand it back over to Scott is that during this month of ELUL, we read the Psalms 27 every day, and it's believed that the light that it talks about in there refers to Yom Teruah, that the Lord is my light and my salvation, and my salvation refers to Yom Kippur, and the Sukkot, because we're going into his dwelling place, refers to Sukkot. So once again, it's getting us ready for the fall festivals. We have a lot of wonderful things coming up. So, one last thing, the letters of ELUL, the Yud, aleph, and lamed, means to be willing to work, to remember, to forgive, to act, and to change.
Yeah, definitely time to kind of investigate those qualities,
right,
and implement them, use them for better. So it's joyous and intimidating. The issues of, we're setting the tone for what will be the coming year, because all that we put into it is helping the Lord judge how he will work with us in the year to come. So there's for a motivation for us to do that as the Lord implements his plan. But some of that is decided during these 10 days of awe between Yom Teruah and Yom Kippur, toward the end of the 40-day period. So like you're saying, it's a very full time when the King is out amongst us and doing and seeing and taking note of our actions and our charities, our repentances, our introspection and willingness to be changed, to be corrected and improved, to be pruned, as he talks about as the vine dresser. Yes.
And pruning hurts.
Pruning hurts.
Probably doesn't hurt the tree, but it hurts us.
It does. It's all for our good, but we have to remember there's a point to it. So we enter into Ki Tetzei, the 49th portion of the 54 portion cycle, and as you can see, we're getting close to the culmination of the year, which then begins Rosh Hashanah and Yom Teruah, and we will be looking toward that as we do these and participate in these. So this is what Ki Tetzei is when you go out. It is Deuteronomy 21:10 through 25:19. and is talking about when you go out to battle and what you might happen to go through, and how those actions are to be managed, and what's the Torah and instruction for those events that might cross your path and most likely did. I'm going to jump down a little bit, and I think even that in there, it sets sort of a messianic tone. One of the things about Dr. Foster, what he does, he comes back to this quite often. I think it's such a very insightful, exciting kind of moment in history. How he looks at the two disciples speaking with Messiah on the road to Emmaus when they don't know who it is, and he's veiled. And he kind of plays the knucklehead and says, well, why is everybody in such a sad state? Why? And they're stymied that anybody wouldn't be in such a sad, demolished state. But it gives him opportunity to begin to walk through the scriptures with them from the beginning, throughout the Torah and the prophets, and demonstrate something about Messiah. And I think this portion contains some of those events that aren't so obviously messianic, but yet in the hindsight are, and sometimes were seen as messianic in some ways that he gives validity to, and sometimes in ways that by him citing them and investigating and working with them and manipulating them, bringing them to the people, he's giving them messianic revelation that was hidden in the past. So we look to Deuteronomy 21, and continuing on, and we talk about the stubborn, rebellious son, who the parents cannot control, and has gone on and made it difficult in the world that they live in their city. They try to discipline him. He refuses to pay attention. We go on to verse 19, and eventually in this striving with this child who's rebellious, who we later we'd say he doesn't pay attention to us, and he lives wildly and gets drunk. In this issues, they're admonished when they still repeatedly cannot control this young man. They are to bring him to the elders at the gates of the town, and there they are to enter into dialogue with him. And then it says, all the men of his town are to stone him to death. And in this way you're to put an end to such wickedness among you, and all Israel will hear about it and be afraid. So, I mean, it's a life and death. It's a capital offense. This person has brought so much devastation into the town and remains uncontrollable.
Well, the one thing about it is, I think that we all have this, or have in the past, have this thought that this is a young person, that it's
Right.
a young boy,
Like a
and you
boy.
think it's a son,
Right.
and so it's not. He
Right.
is really of age, and he's really, so that's why we have to understand it's not some cruel thing that we're doing
Yeah.
to children.
Right.
This is a man,
Right. It's their child. It's their son.
right?
But he is of his own responsibility, and they're trying to still discipline him. This implies going through their age of accountability, for their accountability. But he's of his own. He's responsible for his own actions. I mean, they are still accepting responsibility because they're still trying to manage the situation the best they can. And the Lord even admonishes them to do it because he calls them with the instruction to bring them to the elders of the town at a point. But yeah, as you said, it's important to point out that he's not so young that he's a naive child. It's one who should have grown past the naivete of being a child and acting like a child, and should have grown into a man at this point.
Right, and he talks about the
authority.
two words that, he is a glutton and a drunkard.
Yes.
And so, once again, that glutton, that's not just food. That's,
Right.
it's a glutton for, any kind of lust.
Lust.
I mean,
it's
so,
whatever he's
right,
lusting
and
after
so,
in that moment.
it's tearing him down and
Yes.
his parents and also the community.
Yeah. So you can see it's such a destruction that it becomes a capital offense. And once he resists the elders, this is the point they're brought to. So again, it's not taken lightly by either one. The elders, the parents, it really has to be pushed to the point where we've got nothing else to do. He has to be contained or he's going to destroy more than there's any benefit. So he's called to be stoned to death. And it says all the men of the town are stoned to death. So you can see the responsibility of the community to kind of manage itself in a way. It's responsible for managing the community. I mean, everybody can't just remain on their own when things are impacting the entire community.
It kind of reminds me of a story that I heard, it's probably not biblical, but the thing about like when a leopard, goes before a priest, the last thing that the priest wants to do is pronounce that he's a leper.
Mm.
I mean, so then
Right.
there's all these other things that happened before, and that's the last thing that he wants to do.
Right.
And so it kind of reminds me of all these men. First of all,
Right.
it's never recorded that this happened.
Right.
It's
That
just
anybody took it this far.
right.
Mhm.
And so, but the whole thing that I would have to say is that the men of the city stepped up.
Mhm.
And probably, because I would have to say that every man, that was the last thing that they wanted to do, was take a stone and kill somebody else's son.
Right.
So I would think that the men this is just my thoughts, not scripture, but this is my thought that I think that the men would try to do everything that they could, to get this young man back on the right path.
Right. I mean, the Lord wants everybody to know this is an ultimately serious situation, but He's also counting on the fact that we're going to do everything in our power on the intermediary steps that we don't have to get to that point.
Right, because
whatever else it takes.
Because even in the story of the Soto woman, a lot of people have that
Right.
misunderstanding. She doesn't have to drink that water. If
Right.
she's guilty, she can just
Right.
say she's guilty.
Right.
If you're not guilty, then you could drink it, but to prove that you aren't guilty. But
Right.
the thing about it, again, that whole thing was to hopefully bring
Right.
restoration. So
Right.
really, if you want to know, that is really the heart of Hashem,
Right.
is to bring restoration and to get people back on the
Right.
path, with Him, and that's His heart.
Right. And unfortunately, sometimes the hardness of heart, it takes the threat of death to soften that, to crack through that, because it's so ominous an endpoint. I think it's the same strategy that when Shaul was dealing with someone in a congregation who is again acting in a way much like this, it's going to destroy the community. He gets to the point where if you brought them to their own household, their elders and other people have met with them, and then the elders, at that point, he's to be turned out of the congregation over to the enemy for the destruction of their flesh, that their soul might be saved. So even then, it's this ultimacy of the destruction of the flesh, much like here,
Right.
it's for the purposes of restoration.
Restoration.
And it's such an ominous endpoint that perhaps this result, or the concern of this impending judgment, will cause them to reconsider. Does she want to really drink that and be guilty? Does he really want to get stoned to death, or is he going to just channel his lusts, take them under control? Again, as we talked about in Shoftim, appoint judges that will mitigate these lusts and bring them into alignment so that they're healthy and prosperous,
Right.
and not overtaking him and his own self and everybody else. So I'm going to evoke, and this is kind of one of the connections is just the use of the words, but I'm seeing this as a Messianic, again, hint, foreshadowing, allusion. In Matthew 11 and then in Luke 7, we have the Son of Man came eating freely and drinking wine. which may not be so bad, but you can escalate the description of that as they do, and so they say, aha, a glutton and a drunkard, a friend of tax collectors and sinners. Well, Yeshua goes on to say the proof of wisdom is in the actions it produces. And you can see the actions it produced. In his case, his so-called gluttony and drunkenness produced tax collectors and sinners who repented, who brought Torah into their life and straightened their walk out and controlled their minds and controlled their actions. They began that process. I mean, they were changed by this. Whereas the gluttony and the drunkenness of the rebellious son of Deuteronomy 21, it brought about chaos into the community. It brought about destruction. It didn't bring about ascension and restoration and reparation to the community. Whereas Yeshua, they're calling him a drunkard and a glutton. They're trying to associate him with this rebellious son and bring him into that. And show someone who's destroying the community, yet all the evidence is showing the opposite actions. So not requiring this judgment, not even indicating this judgment, but they're trying to show that and demonstrate that. The other reason I see a connection in this is when you go on back in chapter 21 of Deuteronomy and continuing on in verse 22, we get to a change in venue here, but again, issues of capital crime. If someone has committed a capital crime and is put to death and then hung on a tree, well, his body is not to remain all night on the tree, but you must bury him the same day, because a person who has been hanged has been cursed by God. And this is why in this particular verse it's so important that the imagery of Yeshua and his crucifixion is tied to a tree rather than just boards of wood. The visual of him hung on a tree is so manifestation of this as a prophecy. It paints the visual, and it does connect the fact why it was so important that Joseph of Arimathea and Nicodemus asked that his body be taken down that day. Also because it's a Sabbath, but also because the body should not hang on a tree. It must be buried the same day. So it an issue, and it shows the demonstration of him having been accursed by God. He has become accursed on our behalf. So it demonstrates all the visuals of this situation. So connecting the drunkard and the rebellious son by seeing how the portion connects to how things are laid out in Moses' book, in Deuteronomy, has some Messianic implications and foreshadowings that we don't know the full story of until much later, but then looking back, we can see the prophetic nature of it. And again, I think these are some of the moments that Yeshua brings the two disciples on the road to Emmaus to demonstrate how the Son of Man must be given over and raised up again.
So there's a place where I believe that he goes to Nazareth and to his hometown synagogue. And so they ask him to speak on a portion, and he does. Yeah. And it infuriates, the rabbi there, whoever, the priest. Yeah. And so, he threatened them to that if you don't take those, basically, I'm not. This isn't scripture, but if you don't take those words back, we're going to have to. How do they put it? We're going to have to kind of like deal with you according to scripture, according to the Torah. I'm wondering if that is not some connection to this portion as well, because what do? They take him out to stone the whole congregation. Yeah. And then that he, in a sense, walks past them. I'm just wondering if that's a connection to this Torah portion.
Yeah. Anyway. So you can see how these things become, he says, I am the Word made flesh. It's said of him this, and he literally is. In all the instances, there's some evidences of his life lived out over many centuries by many different people, but yet then come to culminate in the life of one man. And that's who walked around. The Word became flesh and dwelt with us. And all these things have places to manifest. So
right, and like I said, I think I said last week that there's like over 350 prophecies, and then
right.
Then about the Messiah and the work of the Messiah, and he fulfilled or made full the ones that had to do with his first coming, because we've got several that still have to happen, mainly his second coming.
Right.
And so, but the whole thing of it is that there's all these foreshadows that really aren't included in the prophecies, that also attest to the fact that he is the Messiah.
Right. And then those kind of things fall into, like, if you have eyes to see and ears to hear, these are the kinds of references that go on that are a little more veiled, but yet, bear fruit in time. You could see them come to pass, and it really it had, certainly these events had their immediate implication in the time that they were spoken, but they were also spoken. It's kind of like when someone speaks and they're having a conversation, but they know other people are listening and they want them to hear that. Some people say that's what Judah was doing when he spoke to Joseph in Genesis, that he was really speaking to God, or while he's speaking to Joseph, and some look at it like he was speaking to Joseph, but he wanted God to hear this. He knew he'd be listening. So it's that kind of idea. These things had their implication and certainly their direct day-to-day needs if this situation comes up, but it's also hinting at something yet to come, and that when we see it happen, we can go, like when Passover happens, or when we read about Abraham taking Isaac up, and it says God will provide him a lamb. Well, his own lamb. And it's those kinds of issues that have another manifestation to come. Certainly they had their direct implication right there.
And the other day I was thinking of this, and once again I have these crazy thoughts, because I was thinking, about Moshe and that the Lord's going to take him up on the mountain, or he did take him up on the mountain, and he was looking north, east, west, south. I mean, he wasn't just looking east towards Jerusalem, or where the future Jerusalem was going to be. He was looking in all directions, and we talked about it, I think, at Monday Night Torah study a few weeks back, that he saw down through history, and that the Lord gave him that, that privilege in a sense. But anyway, so I was thinking about, I'm wondering if Abraham, if the Lord didn't give him some sort of insight, for him to say that the Lord's going to provide, the Lord had to show him something. And I think that even when they were up on the mount and he was preparing and once again, it wasn't one of those things where Abraham was going to come down hard on him. They do it in a very, it doesn't hurt. There's no, you can barely feel it, but it's a very humane way. But I'm just wondering if the Lord didn't give him, while he was up on that hill or that mountain, if he didn't give, Abraham a vision as well.
Right. Yeshua notes a midrash that talks about it. He said he mentions it, references it, I think is the word I'm looking for, by saying Abraham saw his day. But in the discussion that the sages looked at it, is they saw one of the reasons that the Lord chose Abraham is looking down through Abraham's line and saw the Messiah to come. So I think perhaps in there he saw that in his own self, that his great-grandchild would be the deliverer, the true deliverer, the full deliverer that they're going through the process now, demonstrating of something yet to come.
Yeah, I just felt like there was
He
something
would've seen-
real spiritual in that moment,
Right.
that he got a vision of some sort. I don't,
Yes,
you know.
the bigger
Mhm.
picture of
Yeah.
what was going on here and
Mhm.
why this bell is being rung into eternity.
Mhm.
For this event to take place, it wasn't just for the sake of its own self,
Right.
but for the greater work of salvation and restoration. So another one comes up in this, that ties Matthew and this portion. And the other one was Matthew and Luke both mentioned the issue of the drunkard and the rebellious son. And this is in Deuteronomy 22. If as you're walking along, you happen to see a bird's nest in a tree or on the ground with chicks or eggs, and the mother bird is sitting on the chicks or the eggs, you are not to take the mother with the chicks. You must let the mother go, but you may take the chicks for yourself, so that things will go well with you and you will prolong your life. And it sounds kind of sweet, but it really has more admonition in that. And you can read it that way, but you could also read it very much the way I read it, where it's just kind of going along. But in 7, it's really an impediment. You must let the mother go. It's not a choice. And if the mother doesn't go, you're to be aggressive about getting her to go. You must let the mother go. And even to the point of, in more modern English, I guess, you must cause the mother to go. The mother must go is how the instruction is here, so that you don't take the chicks and the mother, and that things will go well with you and you will prolong your life. Well, how is that messianic? Well, it's a couple of things. Because historically, what this was known as is the least of the commandments. The least of the commandments was to do this and participate this if you end up in this situation. And how does that give light? Well, in Matthew 5, the Messiah cites this verse, 5:17 and 18. So the idea is, by citing it, he's connecting himself to this in a very direct way. There's also some other things that do that, because some of the midrash that takes place about the Messiah, and in this, and I can't think at this moment of where that is, but one of the great writings, it talks about the Messiah being held in a nest, as a bird held in the nest far away and constrained. So this idea of chasing the Messiah away is in this, and he's giving credence to that idea, and the thought of Messiah being held in the bird's nest was a reference to where the Messiah is being held. So he's now giving that midrash a little more teeth, and tying it to himself by invoking it. But what he goes on to say is, don't think that I have come to abolish the Torah or the prophets. I have not come to abolish, but to complete them. So again, he's connecting these ideas, and then by invoking it, he's giving it messianic implication. But some of the sages already had seen some messianic foreshadowing in this, but as a practical thing, it was known as the least of the commandments. So when he says, don't think that I have come to abolish has the idea of negating, versus to uphold, to fulfill is more to uphold the commandment. So we don't want to negate the commandments and give them no value, much as he admonishes those disciples that he said, you make the laws of God less than the laws of man. They're abolishing the commandments. They're negating commandments, or the intensity of a commandment. They're lessening it and diluting it by handling it the way they are. But he has come to uphold the Torah and give it validity and strength. And yes, indeed, I tell you that until heaven and earth pass away, not so much as a yud or a stroke will pass from the Torah, not until everything that must happen has happened. So whoever disobeys the least of these commandments, again, the least of these commandments, going back to Deuteronomy 22:6, will be called the least in the kingdom of heaven, but whoever obeys them and so teaches them will be called great in the kingdom of heaven. For I tell you that unless your righteousness is far greater than that of the Torah teachers and Pharisees, you will certainly not enter the kingdom of heaven. Mm-hmm. So this little least of the commandment thing is giving a lot of attention, a lot of authority, and a lot of teeth. So it's a way of looking at it, because we might look at it and say, well, if I never run into that, and most of us have never run into that, then we might think it's the least of the commandments, I don't even have to worry about it. But historically, this is what was called the least of the commandments. So it wasn't up to each of the hearers to decide, well, which is the least to me, and so that may be the least to you, and this one's the least to me. This was generally the consensus, that this is the least of the commandments, and what people would have been drawn to think about when he's doing this. So again, it starts to have Messianic implications of the bird nest, and that the Messiah will be chased away, that he'll be held away while the children are sort of prone. And some days we might feel that relationship and feel a little bit more prone, and the Lord is not quite as near to us as we would like, and things are going a little tough, and we look for the care and the comfort of our mother. But we have to remember, he's always with us.
Yes. And this might not have anything, but as you're talking, I'm thinking about, it's Matthew 23:37, and so, we see this picture where Yeshua's up on a hillside. There's a picture, I don't know whether that's really where he was at, but I think so. And he was on a hillside, and he's looking down on Jerusalem, and he says, "O Jerusalem, Jerusalem, the one who kills the prophets and stones those who are sent to her, how often I wanted to gather your children together as a hen gathers," this is the part, "the hen gathers her chicks under her wings, but you are not willing." And so in that picture, of course, Yeshua would have wore a talit, or at least a garment with the fringes or tassels on the tzitzit on the bottom.
Yes.
And the picture that is there, he's got this on, and I can just see him opening up his talit. It's kind of like even Psalms 91, how he wants to open up his wings and bring his chicks within under his wings to protect them. And we've seen lots of pictures when maybe a hailstorm is coming, and a mother, a hen, will open up her wings and bring in her little chicks for safety. She might get pelted to death, but her chicks are okay.
They survive.
And so anyway, that's kind of how I see.
Amen.
And I know that doesn't have anything to do with that, but anyway, I just had to kind of.
Yeah, that's a visual. I think there's a part that he left that with for us. So again, in this time of the 7 consolations, may we focus in on the consoling manifestation and rising up of the Lord on our behalf, and go out and meet him in the field.
Yes.
Prepare for the festivals to come. And may it be peace to your household.
Amen.
Shalom.